It's been more than a year and a half since Russia launched its brutal assault on Ukraine. And while the fighting has made it impossible to get an accurate count, estimates put the Ukrainian death toll in the tens of thousands at least. Over time, Russia has captured large swaths of the country, but Ukrainian forces have been able to reclaim more than half. Foreign aid and military supplies have played a major role in Ukraine's ability to hold off invading forces, but they're running out of ammunition. And again, American politics are threatening to disrupt the flow of aid. The U.S. has already directed $75 billion in aid to Ukraine since the invasion, and President Joe Biden is calling for over $60 billion more. But Republicans in Congress are holding up his proposal, and the chances it will pass this year are growing slimmer by the day. Tom, what happens to Ukraine if we don't pass this aid proposal?
Well, Putin is sitting there salivating, basically. He's got like a calendar on his desk. One is the date of the 2024 election in America, where he thinks and hopes and prays that Donald Trump will win and pull the plug on Ukraine entirely. And he's looking at our legislative calendar and hoping that Congress will not be able to agree on either the economic or the military elements of this next Ukraine security package. Now, administration people say, Gautam, if they can get the military side of it through, Ukraine will have enough weaponry basically to get it through the next year and to the U.S. election. So that would be very important. They'll have to scramble on the economic side, but at least they can get the military through. If they can't, Ukraine's going to be very, very vulnerable. And it would not only be a tragedy for Ukraine in its effort to recover its territory from this savage invasion by Russia, but it'd be just a tragedy for American power in the world that we supported this country and then just suddenly we walked away. No, kind of tired of that. That would be really awful.
So, Tom, just to step back for a second, I mean, the Republican Party historically has been the one most hostile towards Russian power and influence, and the people who are sort of most hawkish about the war in Israel are the ones who are most reluctant to back Ukraine on its war against brutal aggression. What's going on? Why has the Republican Party suddenly decided that it's much more friendly to Russia than it ever has been at any time in its past?
Gautam, there's a lot of things I'm knowledgeable about, but the craziness of the Republican Party is not one of them because none of it really makes sense. It's not growing out of a strategic assessment of where are we in the world, what do our priorities need to be, and how do we match those ends with our means. This all seems to be driven by a kind of intra-Republican fight, not over the world, but over spending, and using that as a proxy to manifest their conservatism. And none of it's connected to the world. And it's tragic that there isn't even a core of that old Republican Party that understands, why this is important, that we have a chance, if Ukraine could succeed I don't think they're going to drive Russia out, but if we could put it in a position where it could actually have a deal with Russia, it'd be a dirty deal, but where Ukraine would end up in the European Union and with some kind of NATO guarantee, that would be that would be the biggest change in Europe in terms of enlarging the West since East Germany joined West Germany. Because Ukraine is a country that is the biggest, most experienced land army in Europe now. It's one of the world's great breadbaskets, and it produces massive amounts of engineers every year. It's an incredibly talented country with lots of technology entrepreneurship going on there. You add that to the West, I say that's bigger than East Germany joining West Germany. East Germany. Gautam, remind me, who was the KGB chief in East Germany when it fell into the lap of West Germany? I think it was a guy named Vladimir Putin. And I think he sees a rerun here, and that's what he's trying to stop.
So if we looked at this from the Ukrainian side, what is their perspective on the American political debate?
So I was in Ukraine 3 months ago, and they can't make heads or tails out of us any more than anybody else can right now. They're just hoping and praying that we will come through for them, because I think there is an understanding in the Ukrainian military and political elite that we are at peak Ukraine in terms of the amount of support the West can and will give Ukraine, and so there's going to have to be a dirty deal. But in Ukrainian politics, it is so off the table now to actually say that publicly. Some military leaders recently did that and faced a huge blowback. But eventually, Ukraine is going to have that discussion. We're going to have that discussion with Ukraine. We're in the phase of that. but we want them to have that discussion, Gautam, from a position of strength and not from a position of weakness.
What might the deal you're talking about look like?
No one really knows, but Russia would probably keep, roughly, all or part of the Donbass that it's got, and part of that southern strip. For Ukraine, obviously, there's a huge question of its access, to the sea down there that will have to be resolved. But it's going to be something, roughly along these lines. But lately the Ukrainians suddenly out of nowhere, they seem to have made some progress in the south. So who knows? You just hope they can get the best deal they can, and put this war behind them. But Putin may have all the time in the world, and certainly time to wait for Donald Trump to come in and do the deal he wants. So,
are there any feelers on the Russian side showing will openness on their side to that kind of a deal?
It's a really good question. None that I know of. And again, I don't think anyone quite wants to do it yet from any kind of position of weakness, to be approaching them at a time when it looks like Ukraine is not going to get American economic or military aid. But I could definitely see that happening in the next 6 months if we can position Ukraine to have a stronger bargaining position.